I'm Emily Rooney. Welcome to Beat the Press on Contrarian Boston. I'm joined here today by Contrarian Boston editor Scott Van Voorhees, Dan Kennedy of Northeastern University and Media Nation, and Lila Alphonse, editor for the Boston Globe for both Rhode Island and New Hampshire. We've got a whole lot of stuff we're going to dig in today. First, we're going to look at some of the wild and crazy and downright disturbing reports that have come out in the press about what happened to Nancy Guthrie. She, of course, is the mother of Today's Show Savannah Guthrie, who disappeared from her Tucson home more than 2 weeks ago. Then we're going to look at the Jeffrey Epstein story again. Once the passion of the conservative media, it has switched courses and is now the obsession of more mainstream media. And in the wake of the implosion at the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal has stepped up its editorials, daring to be more critical of the Trump administration. All right, first, I'm as fascinated as the next person is about what happened to Nancy Guthrie, but some of the reporting and out there is just downright disturbing. There are websites using AI, some reporting that her pacemaker was found. And then there was this from Fox News host Greg Gutfeld.
Have they given anyone polygraphs? I don't believe they have. I think Savannah Guthrie might want to volunteer to do a poly and say, I just don't want people to speculate that I might be involved. And then what does that do? If you decline after the daughter publicly says she's going to do one, that looks different to me. And then you can move beyond the family of that, so be it.
Okay, well, first of all, Greg Gutfeld doesn't know whether the family has taken polygraph tests or not, and they're not about to put that out in the mainstream media. But the point here is that everyone has gotten involved in the speculation. And as I said, I'm as fascinated as the next person. This is a true crime mystery story, but I don't know. What's your take, Lila?
It's such an unusual case. I mean, the vast majority of the people who go missing are young, they're children. The vast majority of the people who go missing are Black and Indigenous, not white. So the fact that you have an elderly person, I think people over 80 are, it's something like 0.2% of missing persons. And yes, it's true. The majority of people who go missing do end up having been abducted by a member of their own family, someone known to them. But her age is unusual. The ransom note thing is unusual.
Right.
There's a lot of strange things. So I understand the fascination. I even understand, frankly, the suggestion that everyone in the family should take a polygraph test. But as you note, that's not the point he's making. He's trying to insinuate that they've done something terrible for attention, which is bonkers. And the people who are coming out of the woodwork to weigh in, that's kind of the way the media is now. I mean, take the mainstream media aside, people are getting their news from social media. They have for a while. They're getting their news from speculation. Everyone's an expert. So when it's converging on a story that involves real people and horrible things that have happened to a particular family, I think it's even harder to make sense of and to digest all of these inputs that are really, some of them are just really quite insane.
Yeah. One of the things, Scott, that really bothers me is that some of the speculation seems to have detracted from some of the real reporting. For instance, the New York Post has done a really good job. They happen to have been there when the FBI found that black nitrile glove, and they were the first ones to report that that was the real glove. Other like they found 24 other gloves, but the New York Post they've got people on the ground. For some reason, they've been able to be in the right place in the right time. And that's what I mean by some of this awful speculation that it has detracted from real reporting.
Right, and that's so important. I mean, even the Post and the New York Post, that's a big story for them. It's a celebrity story, and when they choose to, they can do some really good reporting. It can do some really fact-based reporting. And unfortunately, the social media world we live in today, that's that doesn't always cut. That's just one voice among many, and you have all sorts of conspiracy theories blooming and speculation about the family, and it's it can take a life of its own and become drive the discussion.
Dan, I've never seen anything like this before. I mean, we've had murder mysteries before. We've had Kidney with Elizabeth Smart. Of course, that was so long
Sure.
ago now. But again, I haven't seen anything like this when we've gotten this kind of speculation.
Well, not since the last time. My students were telling me last week that they don't really understand why this has gotten so much coverage. And I'm not going to sit here and be a news snob. I've been fascinated by this story as much as anybody else. But we have stories that are important and we have stories that are interesting. And this story falls more into the category of a story that's interesting than it is important, although obviously it's very important to the Guthrie family. What I would really like to see come out of this, and it won't, but I would like to see some people in the media think about how they've been covering the hundreds, if not thousands, of people who go missing every year and really don't get much in the way of attention. We can't give this sort of attention to every single case, but we can look at broader trends. I have seen very little on how many people go missing, how often the family is implicated in that, how these cases are resolved. These are interesting and important stories that could come out of this terrible
Yeah,
tragedy.
but no
And
one cares. I
well,
mean, that's the problem, Dan. Yeah,
that's the
that's the problem with
problem.
that kind of, well, we get fixated on one story. That's because it's really interesting and it has a mystery to it. But, as Lila said, most people who go missing, it has something to do with the family. You know, it's it's not that interesting, unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's for sure.
All right. Well, last week we talked, 2 weeks ago, we talked about what's happening at the Washington Post, speculating about the layoffs. And then the next day, those layoffs happened. They wiped out their entire sports department. Many reporters have left, and Jeff Bezos has made it clear that the editorial pages are not for political debate, as we know. First, here's former Boston Globe editor and former Washington Post editor Marty Baron on what Bezos has done there.
I think that he became sort of detached in about 2019 when his marriage broke up, when Amazon was struggling later in 2020, when the Amazon was struggling with the pandemic and all the aspects of that. And then I think he really took a real turn after it looked like Trump was going to be elected president yet again.
What's your take on that, Dan?
Well, it's what has happened to the Washington Post is a tragedy. And not only did he wipe out the entire sports department, but Bezos also wiped out the entire photo department and most of the Metro section. Now, I kind of think that this story has been beaten to death, not just here, but in every other forum you can imagine. So I want to posit that there might be a little bit of good news coming out of this. The Baltimore Banner, which is a large digital nonprofit startup, has announced that they're going to start covering Washington sports, which is great news. And they're going to start moving into the suburbs of Washington to provide some of the local coverage that's been eliminated. Now, if this is successful, maybe we'll have a Washington banner. It
Hmm.
won't be nationally focused the way the Washington Post is, but what's really gone missing here is the local coverage that people who live there are going to be
Mhm.
deprived of as a result of Jeff Bezos's cuts. So maybe the Baltimore Banner can come to the rescue here.
Scott, you made a really interesting point about this because when Jeff Bezos essentially took away its editorial pages, they refused to endorse or they
Sure.
canceled the endorsement of Kamala Harris right before the election. But they also basically said we're not having political debate in our editorial pages. And you've made the point that the Wall Street Journal has really stepped up in this regard. They've got those editorials like Trump's fatness speaks to his fitness, Trump trashing the country's reputation, Donald Trump not unchanged. I mean, this is totally different from them. I mean, being owned by Rupert Murdoch, the Wall Street Journal used to be very conservative. Well, they are.
Sure, it's a real shift. And I remember some coverage back in 2017 or 2018 when the Post was really going gangbusters, saying that the Wall Street Journal was really lost. Like, they didn't know what they really were forced or felt forced to support Trump, weren't doing aggressive reporting. Now it's definitely switched. So the editorials have become much more critical. I mean, some of it makes sense because they're certainly not in favor of tariffs or things that the business community probably feels are, semi-disastrous or damaging. But the reporting is also, they've broken a lot of stories, and they're in some ways it's stories that I would have looked to the Washington Post in the past to have broken, like the stories on there's a couple different examples here, but they had the whole, like, back over the summer. They were the journal was the paper that broke the story about the lewd messages executives had written for Epstein's 50th birthday, including Trump's um, uh, awful
Cartoon.
doodle
Yeah.
and his note to, and it's strange, to vote about a secret and so forth. That triggered a $20 billion lawsuit from Trump. So they have skin in the game there too. They were the first to report this crazy situation where the UAE, United Arab Emirates, were pumped $500 million into Trump family's cryptocurrency venture 4 days before the inauguration. It was all done in secret. So they've really kind of helped fill that gap in. Why is that happening? I don't know. It's the dynamics. There's crazy dynamics in the Murdoch family. Murdoch has been a crazy, kind of very controversial character over the years. They have had a lawsuit, and they've divvied up some of the empire. And I think one of his sons may have more influence now over the Journal, who's not like dyed in the wool, kind of like, right winger, and that may be helping. But it seems to be working. The circulation is up 11%. It's 4.2 million digital, and then maybe 4.6 or 8. Where the Post is now maybe down to 2 million. It's hard to
Yeah.
know. Dan probably has a better read on that, but I saw that from Margaret Sullivan,
Yeah. Right.
who is a good
Nobody knows.
journalist.
They never,
They
it's a
won't say.
privately
Yeah.
held company and they don't report the numbers.
Yeah,
You know,
it's so weird. Yeah.
so Lila, I just have to
Mhm.
tell you, I defended the Boston Globe last time we were talking about the Washington Post, just saying that they've pretty much been very steady on the course, even though they too are owned by a billionaire, a mogul, as Dan calls them. But what's your take on this? The losses at the Washington Post and really the Wall Street Journal taking a real turn in its editorial pages.
I have to agree with Dan. It's a great opportunity for the Baltimore Banner. This summer they went into Montgomery County. They dropped the Baltimore from their name. If you click on their app, it asks you to choose, do you want Montgomery County news or do you want Baltimore
Really?
news? Well,
Oh, wow.
Montgomery County faces Washington. They don't care about Baltimore. So that's a huge thing. They're going to Prince George's County now. I would say that the Washington Post has kind of ignored the suburbs for a while, and focused really more on national and foreign news, which is what makes the elimination of the foreign bureaus also so strange. I think it's important to look at the cuts themselves. It's half the newsroom. It's 300 people, including their federal government whisperer, Hannah Nathanson, who was had her stuff seized by the federal government just less than a month ago.
Yeah.
So you have to wonder why all of these important people who are holding the Trump administration accountable have been let go, and the people with the institutional memory who could tell current reporters this is what we did last time have been let go. Um, Bezos has also made huge cuts at Amazon. And I think one thing that's important to remember about these huge corporate giants, billionaires, they know which side their bread is buttered on. They are not going to put that side flat on the floor. So if doing things that appease the current administration helps Bezos's other companies. Just right after the cuts were announced, there was JD Vance doing a huge walkthrough at his space engineering company.
True.
So they're looking at a longer game. They're not looking at journalism. I also have to agree with Scott on the kind of rise of the Wall Street Journal in taking the lead and some criticism, but they also know what they're doing. They also know on which side their bread is buttered. And if people can't go to the Washington Post for criticism on Trump, maybe it's an opportunity to increase their readership. I mean, I'm a little cynical, but this is a business, right? They're not really just looking to spread information. They're also looking to make money and to gain readers. I would say, though, one thing that's fascinating to me about the Wall Street Journal's recent changes is that I mean, their primary readers, their primary audience are business people
Mhm.
and very wealthy business people,
Yep.
right? So if these wealthy business people are more willing to read criticism about Trump, maybe that's a bellwether about what's really going on in the business world that matters so much to this top echelon in this country.
I just want to interject something here. I don't think the Wall Street Journal has changed all that much.
Mhm.
It's a great paper, and it always has been.
Sure.
During Trump's first term, it was the Journal who reported on Michael Cohen's role in arranging for payoffs to Trump's
Stormy,
paramours
Stormy
to keep them
Daniels. Yeah.
Mhm.
silent. And that was like the only case that led to a guilty verdict against Trump, and that was the Wall Street Journal.
All right. Good point. All right. Well, Jeffrey Epstein, sick of the story or not, the Epstein story, his, abuse of young girls to his, cadre of the powerful people in the government that he courted on his private island, to the tranches of documents that have been released and dripping out and all haven't come out. The point is, the story is not going away anytime soon, although it is getting much more attention now in the mainstream, or I should say more liberal press than it once did. It was really once the obsession of the more conservative press. Now it's, definitely taken a turn with both. The New York Times has devoted teams and time, and so has CNN. Last week, during live coverage of a congressional hearing, Attorney General Pam Bondi was on the stand with Epstein's victims were standing right behind her. Here she is lambasting Democrats in Congress for focusing on a story that she basically says no one cares about anymore.
You sit here and you attack the president, and I am not going to have it. I'm not going to put up with it. They are talking about Epstein today. This has been around since the Obama administration. Donald Trump, the Dow right now is over. The Dow is over $50,000. I don't know why you're laughing. You're a great stock trader, as I hear, Raskin. The Dow is over 50,000 right now. The S&P at almost 7,000. And the NASDAQ smashing records. Americans' 401ks and retirement savings are booming. That's what we should be talking about. We should be talking about making Americans safe. We should be talking about, what does a Dow have to do with anything? That's what they just asked. Are you kidding?
I mean, what world is she talking about?
It's like she took a page from Judge Kavanaugh's hearing. It's like if she just comes out going, "What?" Everyone will stop actually asking any questions and focus on her behavior, and it's working.
I know, and Lila, but
Mhm.
those victims were standing right before her, behind her. She never addressed them. She
Mhm.
never. She was so wound up. It was like she was addressing an audience of one, which was Donald Trump.
Mhm.
I mean, uh,
Yeah.
again, this is not it's not like the Nancy Guthrie story, but it has so many legs and it's so deep, and so much more is coming out. And I think the New York Times has got notes, has put a team of reporters on it, and there's more to come. We haven't seen the end of this, and I for one am not sick of it.
I actually don't think the mainstream media is doing enough on it.
Hmm.
Oh, interesting.
I think they're being really superficial. I think they're looking for outrage and focused on outrage. I mean, just a couple days ago, I guess like over the weekend, New York Times acknowledged that readers want more, and they published this weirdly self-serving take on how they're digging into the files,
I saw that.
talking to four of the reporters or two reporters and two editors who are doing it. They're focused on like, look at the good work we're doing. No, that's not the point. I mean, you have 24 journalists on it. Um, and I'm finding out more information about the Epstein files by going on Twitter or Threads. I think that that's actually part of the government's reasoning. There's a lot of damning stuff in there, and they've made it impossible to find. They've dumped all of it there, but instead of pointing out, hey, look, you've made this impossible to find, we need to hold people accountable. the mainstream media is sifting through the hay looking for needles. I mean, Al Jazeera did a really good job talking about the logic of doing a dump like this, pulling out actual
Hmm.
examples and publishing them. I'm not seeing the mainstream media do that.
Hmm. Scott,
Yeah, it's interesting because I kind of dismissed, I mean, for a long time, it felt like this is the story was kind of driven by kind of right-wing news sites and social media and got into all these sorts of crazy conspiratorial theories. And now it seems to, for whatever reason, hitting home or attracting, even if it's superficial, more interest from the mainstream media, especially with that data dump. I did a story. You just started searching around. You start searching. Okay, who's in this? Came up with a case where aide to John or former aide to John Kerry was involved. He had a lobbying firm. Epstein had a buddy who was thrown in jail in Africa. Who was kind of a alleged kleptocrat. Went to bat with it. I think reading through those files, and what's really kind of disturbing or shocking, because you come across a lot of other things, is just people are kissing up to this guy. He's a convicted sex offender. And not only that, he wasn't trying to hide it, right? I mean, he didn't
yeah.
change his lifestyle, right? So here he is, and you have academics, you have business people, you have it's just really gross. This Bob
Royalty.
Crow, who's a lobbyist, joking about I'm down in Florida with my kids. I'm thinking like, well, don't invite this guy over because he's bad news. Like there's nothing like he's just like this wonderful guy, and there's just like it's almost immoral. I mean, it's really, and I guess I shouldn't be shocked, but it felt like they just what if you they were just looking for him for money or
Money.
other people for
And
other
Mary
things.
Summers and his wife. I mean, sucking up to him so he'll, publish her poetry or whatever it was.
Yeah, like really, you need this? You can't find another source of funding. Well, then that's a problem, right? Maybe your poetry isn't good enough. I mean, come on.
But it's not only
Um,
funding, it's proximity to power. It's
Yeah.
it's his
yeah.
network, right? It's not that they just want access to Epstein's money for investments. They want access to the other people who Epstein has access to. And it's all about getting what you want for yourselves. And if the people who get hurt aren't people who society or your circle think of as important, then it doesn't matter, right? That's how the whole level of stuff operates.
So
Speaking,
Dan, what's your take? How's this going to end? I mean, is somebody going to draw, connect the dots, and we're going to have a clear map of this
Hmm.
eventually about everybody that was involved?
well, no, because there are still several million documents that have not been made public. The ones that have been made public are heavily redacted. The big questions that people have are involve Trump and to a lesser extent Bill Clinton.
Mhm.
And I don't know that we're ever going to get any clarity on either one of those. Speaking of Lila's point, Ezra Klein had a fantastic hour and a half long interview the other day with an independent journalist talking about the concentric circles that go from the very small number of people who presumably were involved in the worst of Epstein's crimes. And then you move out and you get this group of academics, business people, all kinds of people from all walks of life who are just sucking up to Jeffrey Epstein because they want something from him. And as Lila says, a lot of it is just connections to other people. These files are very difficult for journalists to wrap their arms around. I was really struck by something that the great Julie K. Brown said the other day. She's the reporter for the Miami Herald who
Who broke the story, we
exposed
should
an
say. Yeah.
awful lot of what Epstein did. She said she can't go through all of this, and she has been really grateful for readers who have done deep dives into different parts of the files and provided her with information that she can follow up on. And she ended this interview I heard her give by saying, "Please, if you've got more, send them to me,"
Hmm.
because it's just so difficult to deal with this stuff.
Good point. Well, I can't get enough of it either. I'd like to see it resolved, but I agree with you, Dan. It probably won't be. All right, back by popular demands, we've got rants and raves this week. All right, who wants to go first? I think I'll start with you, Dan, since you're right there.
Okay. Well, we were talking about the Wall Street Journal and what a great paper it is. And I actually think that Emma Tucker, the editor, is probably the leading newspaper editor in the country right now. Well, anyway, I have a rave for this deep, deep dive that the Journal did on Kristi Noem, the Secretary of Homeland Security, and her top aide, Corey Lewandowski.
Yeah, watch
We've
that.
heard that name before.
Hmm.
And the story reports that they may be romantically involved,
Ooh.
but it's just full of fantastic details. And probably my favorite is that a Coast Guard pilot who brought her somewhere was fired for forgetting her blanket.
Hmm.
And then they had to quickly rehire him because there was no one else to fly
I
them
play.
back. I mean, it's
That-
it's
yeah,
just a disaster.
yeah, it's a good one. Can't make that up. All right, Scott, what have you got?
Oh, I have a rant. Was listening to NPR's coverage of the Munich Security Conference, and and it's fine. You know how important it is and how grave it is. And then they're going down the list of people who are grandstanding there, and I'm thinking like this is a showcase for the 2028 election. You have Rubio, you have Newsom, you have uh, AOC, and there's no mention of it. I'm like, wait a second, I must have missed something, And I went back over the transcripts, I couldn't find it. I'm like, this is, I mean, this, you can't cover something like that and also realize that there's another element to it. It's like the Davos conference. I mean, you could all just take it super seriously. They're making pronouncements about the future of the world, but it's also a big schmooze fest, and people are using it for other purposes. So that was just I didn't understand why, and maybe there's something else going on there. They're under a lot of pressure right now, NPR. So I don't know, but it really puzzled me.
Didn't mention it. All right, Lila, what do you got?
So I have one story that is both a rant and a rave. And it's a piece in The Atlantic by Elizabeth Brunig called "This is How a Child Dies of Measles When Your Family Becomes a Data Point in an Outbreak." Super compelling. It's really well written. It's really gripping and vivid. That's my rave. The rant is for the fact that it was presented as a reported column when it's actually just really thoroughly researched fiction. There is no family that she interviewed. This is not her family, which is what makes it, the headline makes it sound like she's writing a first person. It's written in the first person. The child does not die, spoiler alert. But the article was written off of extensive interviews with lots of different doctors and health professionals who have treated people with measles. So all of the medical information in it and the descriptions of that medical information, what's actually happening to your body as measles progresses, that's all accurate. But it was written in such a way that it's really emotionally manipulative and misleading. It leans into stereotypes about people who choose not to vaccinate, making a lot of other assumptions about other parts of their lives, other things, other choices they may have made. And then I found that all of that um, seemed to really undermine the point. It could have made a really important point about the
Hmm.
horrors of getting measles, the need for vaccination, how our government is pulling people away, how there's a big resurgence of measles and what that does to a community. And instead, it went for kind of sensationalistic drama. And I ended up thinking, God, that was really well written. I kind of wish I'd never seen it.
All right. Well, finally tonight, I have a rant for the Associated Press. Several days, like 4 or 5 days after that horrible shooting in Canada, where it had been well reported, documented that a transgender teen had killed his family and then went onto the campus and killed another 6 or 8 people. The AP reported a story. It was essentially a story about a father who lost his 12-year-old daughter. It was actually, once again, a really nicely written piece by the Associated Press. You come to the end of the story, and twice they refer to Jesse Rutzelaar, the shooter, as she. Okay, that's what she wanted to be called. But they never mention the fact that this was a transgender teen that hadn't gone through the entire process of transitioning. And my bigger point is that if it really had been an 18-year-old girl, that would have been a bigger story almost in the shooting itself, because for the most part, teenage girls don't go around committing mass murders. So they left out a salient fact in the report that had already been well reported, well documented. And I think it also speaks to this whole issue about why people get turned off by the mainstream media. They think they're too woke, too PC, that it was almost like they intentionally left that out because, oh, that would be an ancillary point. No, it was a critical point, and it already had been well documented, and it made me mad because it made it sound like some girl went around shooting, and that wasn't the case. So that's that.
Oh, okay. I'm going to push back a little bit, Emily. Studies show that 1 out of 1,000 mass shootings is committed by somebody who's transgender. The other thing is,
It had
uh,
nothing to do with him being transgender. The point
well,
was that they referred to the person as a she when that was not, they it left out a salient point. Had nothing to do with the fact that it was a transgender who did it. It was that they made it sound like it was a teenage girl.
well, certainly her mental illness has been well documented, including in that story. She'd had major mental health problems for
Yeah.
years, and the fact that she had been trying to move toward a new gender identity for 5 years without apparently getting any treatment at all or
Yeah,
support
but whose fault
from
was
her
that?
family.
Well, the
That
family
seems to
referred
be
to him as
salient too.
him too. So
Yes, they
apparently the
did.
kid had huge issues that went well beyond being a transgender. All right, enough of that. Thank you, Dan. Thank you all. That's it for Beat the Press on Contrarian Boston. Thanks to Dan Kennedy, Scott Van Voorhees, Lila Alphonse. See you next time. I'm Emily Rooney.
The audio preview.